Hi there, this is Matt at State of Flux, and happy Boxing Day, everybody! That's right, it's Boxing Day once more, so we're going to do a review for another boxing movie. Last year we did a review for Rocky. It only makes sense this year to do Rocky 2, the second of the Rocky franchise. And this is one that is an interesting film in the sense that you have to wonder how it got made, or the atmosphere with which it got made. I know how it got made. The first movie made a ton of money and became a Best Picture winner. That said, if you're Sylvester Stallone making this movie, I can't imagine the pressure you would have been under. Sylvester Stallone kind of self-created this persona of an underdog. He himself is a mirror of Rocky in a lot of ways. And this is something I didn't really touch on in my review for the first Rocky film because it wasn't really relevant then. Rocky as an underdog story is very good. I did talk about that, but Sylvester Stallone as the underdog story is almost more interesting. And this movie works in the sense because he channeled what he was going through and the pressures of carrying on a sequel into this movie, which is how it helps make this film work at all. I'm going to not bury the lead and say this is a good movie, but it's not as good. We'll touch on some of the minutiae of why that is in a minute, but what I do want to talk about is the Stallone of it all. He himself wrote Rocky with intention to play Rocky and the hopes to direct. Now, he was kind of scoffed at for the notion of being an actor in the film. People were willing to buy the screenplay, but not with him attached, certainly not with him directing. He finally found in MGM a studio that had enough confidence that he could play the part, but still didn't give him the chance to direct. And the movie that came out mirrored his journey to getting that film made. A movie that everybody second-guessed, starring somebody that nobody believed could pull it off, and he charmed people and fought so hard to become a believable player in Hollywood. Just as Rocky was a leg breaker and a bum, Sylvester Stallone, prior to doing this, was doing like low-budge movies, extra work. He even did a porn that's been rechristened after the fact called The Italian Stallion, after his Rocky character, that rumor has it he was penning the screenplay for the first movie on the set of. I don't know if that's genuine or actual, but that's the story I've heard. So when you go from that to being a nominee for screenplay, for acting, for and winning the Best Picture of the year from a surefire Scorsese win that everybody assumed was going to happen, all eyes and attention are on this man who did the unthinkable. He went the distance, and this time he won. And so what do you do with it once you've done it? And that's what this movie starts asking. He goes the distance with Creed at the end of Rocky, and let's be honest, Rocky shouldn't have probably lived past that first movie. The second movie onwards, well, some of the movies are good, some of the movies are great, some of them I even may like better than that first movie, but all of them dilute the quality of that first movie to some respect, because that first one is so succinct and strong in its screenplay, in its execution, in its performances, that when you revisit some of that stuff with sequels, it diminishes the quality a little bit of that first film. I think people don't take Rocky as a Best Picture win as seriously because eventually you get to Rockies 4 and 5 and things like that, which take the seriousness out of the storytelling. That said, what this movie does is it opens with that final fight, and we visit where do you go from here, and you see how sudden shift in fame goes to Rocky's head. Not in a malicious way, not in a way where he's going to be a jerk or anything like that, because that's not Rocky. It goes to his head in the sense that he's like, he went the distance. He's undefeatable. Like, he is going to make a great life for he and Adrian. He's going to buy fancy cars, fancy watches. He's going to get great jackets. He's going to get studs for his wrist, heavens, and his dog and stuff like that. And he's going to get his wife the most perfect coat. He's going to marry Adrian, which is the thing that he only truly cared about. He didn't even care whether or not he won the end of the previous movie. And it's that element of the story that really kind of works. You see how fame thrust at him suddenly changes Rocky, and how he has to learn from it. He learns that he has a deficit and he's not able to read, really. And when he's supposed to be doing a advertisement, and he's incapable of delivering believable dialogue at the camera, even reading off of cue cards, he starts to try and better himself, which is truly a Rocky thing to do, by reading out loud to his wife and subsequently child. And that's something that I really responded well to, and I feel like that was probably something that was channeled from Stallone's own experiences. I feel like a lot of the best parts of this film are an echo of what Stallone was going through at the time he was making it. Now, he certainly dirtied it up. Stallone himself lived a much cleaner and neater life than the Rocky character ever did. Rocky is designed as a man from the gutter, kind of trying to rise above, and Stallone was always elevated above that. But I feel like the experience is shared, and I have to wonder if Stallone found himself struggling with reading from prompters. Not necessarily the reading aspect of it. Certainly he is a very literate person. He wrote the screenplay for damn near all the Rocky movies, if you're including the Creeds. He did write all the Rocky movies. He wrote most of the... he even wrote one of the Creed films. But I wonder if it's the presentation in front of the camera on on a whim, when you just have to kind of wing it and be natural in yourself, that he struggled with when he was doing the publicity run for Rocky, or post-Rocky. And he channeled that into the film. But the film is something that's unique in that it's, as I say, it's a good film. This kind of lives and dies by Roger Ebert's rule of a good movie has 3 good scenes, if not great scenes, and no bad scenes. It definitely fulfills that. There is not a single bad scene in this movie. I'd say every scene is good, and the 3 scenes that I think are great are, I would argue, better than anything even in that first Rocky movie. The weight of drama I love in this film when you hit those dramatic respects. And yet, it is a touch stale, because you've seen essentially the trajectory of this film already in the first one mirrored, while also having a dated sense to the movie that eclipses how the first one was dated. I criticized that the one thing you could say about the first Rocky is that nearly 50 years later, it has some qualities that are dated. I would say that this film has far more qualities that are dated than that one does. Not just the fashion and the tiger on the leather jacket and the studded wrist stuff. I'm talking about the gender dynamics and how women are kind of talked about and treated is a very old-fashioned line of thinking. Now, that isn't necessarily out of character for a character like Rocky and the world of boxing. However, when he's supposed to be atypical of those kind of people, it does come off as kind of off-putting, because he's the positive character that's supposed to kind of already be right most of the time, or identifiable with. And I just don't love some of that. Especially the like, I never asked you to stop being a woman, so why you gotta ask me to stop being a man? That whole little bit, that is just one great big cringe. Also, during the final boxing thing at the end, the boxing match didn't feel as authentic as the first movie. Now, I know the first movie was pretty staged boxing fight, but this one feels far more orchestrated and staged, and you can really tell that Stallone hadn't quite grasped a sense of direction with the action scenes. I think he's great with the dramatic scenes, and he knows where to place his camera very, very well. But I don't love how he directs the action in this. That will change throughout his career. I think Stallone is a very gifted filmmaker, a strong director, especially with action. So that's something he learns eventually. But like the final punch of the match is a little like, you kind of roll your eyes at it. The angst, the drama. But I was talking about those three scenes, and I want to focus on them, because those three scenes that make this movie a good movie, an almost great movie, are one very early on scene, where you have Stallone and Talia Shire, when he first gets out of the hospital and he's being kind of hounded by the press and job opportunities and stuff, but he just wants to get away from it and spend some time with his girl. And they're roaming around the Philadelphia Zoo, and he does his little like, I was wondering if you didn't want to, or if you wouldn't mind marrying me very much. That whole scene is so incredibly charming. One of my favorite lines of dialogue in any movie ever is, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind marrying me very much. Is so cute. I love them so much, and it's really their romance that resonates with this whole franchise, but especially coming off of that first film and moving directly into this one. It instills you with love for these two characters. This is why you're watching, the continuation of spending time with people that you grew attached to in that first one, that you'll continue to grow attached to and be able to latch on to in the subsequent sequels, some of which are not necessarily the greatest. But hey, you get to spend more time with them, and that's nice. I love that scene. It's great, it's small, it's fluffy by comparison, but I really like it. The scene where Stallone and Adrian are really confronting the fact that they have monetary issues, they can't afford the house they just bought to feed themselves, she's pregnant, and he just got let go of from his job, and he's trying to work out, and she's like, I can work, and then he's so disappointed that he can't be the breadwinner for the family. But I also think that's an important message to say that, there's nothing wrong with her being that. I don't think the film ultimately lands with that message, because she kind of gets immediately hurt when she does so, but I liked that whole scene, and that just felt so dramatically real between a couple. And I genuinely think that scene is very, very strong, very, very good. Again, some of the language used in that scene is kind of dated, but it's a good scene nonetheless. The best scene of the film comes after Adrian is put into hospital, having slipped into a coma, and Mickey, who has admittedly several good scenes in this film, including the one where he slaps Rocky to illustrate that Rocky's blinding in that one eye, where Mickey goes to talk to him at the chapel within the hospital. And Mickey is trying to get him on board with being the fighter and taking Creed on, but then resolves to the fact that that's not what his thing is. He is Rocky's mentor, and right now Rocky needs a mentor through this terribly tragic time where he may be losing his wife and child. And it is a incredibly powerful scene. Acted so incredibly well that Burgess Meredith in that Mickey role, who is my favorite character in this entire franchise, including the Creed movies, and gives the best performance of any actor in any of the Rocky franchise, I think, in this movie, in this scene. How he didn't get nominated for this movie is beyond me. He was nominated for the first Rocky, but not this one. That said, much of the rest of the movie is good. There's no real bad scenes. Those are the three highlight scenes of the picture for me. And then you get to the big final fight. It is a much more, like, visually, it's designed to give you the rah-rahs. A lot of that is happening throughout this film. Rocky has now become kind of a touchstone character, even by his second film, where he has grabbed a cultural zeitgeist of interest around him, so much so that when Rocky does his run up the stairs, this time he's got a crowd of kids following him and stuff like that, which you would criticize as being like, ugh, that's so hokey, and it kind of admittedly is, but at the same time, I've been to those steps, and mofos are running up and down them all day, and if you were to get Stallone in that situation running up them, you would have a slew of kids running right behind him. I believe the authenticity of that scene, as hokey as it is grounded in a sense of realism. But the sensationalism of this movie is amped up. The first one was a believable underdog story, and this one is a Hollywood underdog story that just happens to mirror Stallone's experience of what happened when he actualized his underdog story. It's a good movie. I give it 3.5 stars. It's not as good as the first one, and I'm probably being a little generous by giving it 3.5, but there's so much to like. I haven't even talked about Creed himself. Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers, is so good in this movie. I like how in this film he is confronted with his win from the previous film, which several people viewed as a draw or a loss, and his ego is damaged because how could he let this nobody become somebody in his graces? And that's something that is explored where he won't let this happen, and his PR team is just like, you do know that if you come at this guy, you're gonna look like a villain. And he's like, whatever gets him into the fight. And he's not, strictly speaking, a bad guy. Obviously, he goes on into the other films not being a bad guy, and he wasn't a bad guy in the first one. But he has this sense of hubris that just he needs broken. And this film, he allows himself to channel being a bad guy to Rocky because he is so mad that somebody was able to topple him, or even suggest that he could be toppled. And that's fascinating. I really like what his character goes through in this film, his own character journey. All the characters are grown and progressed in somewhat interesting ways. Paulie has some interesting stuff to do, much less than he did in the previous movie. But you see some growth in his character there. Yeah, Rocky 2 is a good movie. I know people that like this one better just because it has the Hollywood ending. And I get it, but it's just not as good as that first movie. Where do you land on Rocky 2? Again, I give it 3.5 out of 4 stars. Probably, maybe even deserves only 3, but I'm going to give it 3.5. I do love some of those scenes quite a bit. What I love in this movie, I love more than I loved in the first movie. What I don't love in this movie stands out as a glaring oof amidst an otherwise fine film. Thanks for watching. Hit that bell, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and peace. Also, happy Boxing Day, everybody.